Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Academy of Advanced Thought. And so today is episode number 45 of 50, the series of 50, which will then be converted into a book called Inside the Academy of Advanced Thought, which is the sequel to The Rise of Advanced Thought. And all of these interviews are going to be transcribed and then put into a giant, what will be a 50-hour plus book, which is probably, maybe it should be chapterized or diarized or volumes. But anyway, today I'm absolutely over the moon to be joined by Sommer, Bentley and Xavier. And these people have, I was always wanting to bring them onto the show anyway, but then when they invited me onto their show, it was like, well, this is the time. And so we're going to have to do this now. And I'm so happy about that. And you'll see why as we go. I will let them introduce themselves, but in very brief detail. I met them via the local gym, actually, and then realized that there was this new podcast that came out called the IX Experience, which is the one that I was on. And that is the intelligent podcast for the over 40 suffering from the physical signs of stress and ready to learn the truth about becoming their best ever, most vital selves. So Sommer, Isaac, I wondered whether you could both do a short intro so people know a bit more about you, and then we'll go wherever this rabbit hole has decided to lead us. Who goes first? Ladies.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
Yes, I'm Summer, also known as Tink. Tink is my nickname. Now my number plate for my car is Tinks, and everybody loves that.
Nice.
But I am the founder of a multi-million-dollar company, a construction company, which I niched very heavily, and that literally transformed the trajectory of our business. On the side of that, I'm actually super passionate about the mind-body connection. And that came about as a result of a tragic accident with my father when he had a tree limb fall on his head and he shattered the fourth vertebrae when the third and the fifth compacted. And he became a quadriplegic. So that experience caused me or stimulated a deep desire to start studying the mind and the body, thoughts, beliefs, and how they impact our epigenetic expression. So the genes that we can turn on and off in our cells. And then I deep dived into cells themselves, and I couldn't get enough information. So I've combined a whole bunch of different skill sets, EFT, NLP, all the ones that everybody seems to have these days, which is great. They're great tools for the tool belt, and continued that trajectory of mind body. I now combine that with my passion for business, and that's how I've ended up working in the IX Experience and developing that with my bestie, Isaac.
Perfect. Great. Good conduit. Isaac, it's your turn.
Yeah, so we called it the first time we ever met. Even though she had her normal name, I just went, no, she's got to be Tinkerbell, and it's stuck ever since.
Perfect.
And yeah, Tink and I met number 2013, and we hit it off straight away, and that's how we've evolved what we've got today. We seem to be this great team where I have this sort of creative side. She has her own unique creativity, but she's just a gun at getting stuff done and marketing and smart, and slapping me in the head when I start to wander off. And she may even do it in this podcast where I go off and she'll go, no, get back on point.
Perfect.
So, my beginning, I fell off a cliff when I was 10 years old, and 10-meter cliff, brain damage, busted kidney, burst artery, then slammed into rocks when I was 19, thought I was going to be a paraplegic. And from that point, I went in a trajectory of going into the fitness industry, but always drawn towards rehabilitation, but not just rehabilitation of people's bodies, but I could see the emotions, the whole psychology, and how you couldn't separate the two. And I've evolved that over the years with the Feldenkrais method, studied neurophysics therapy, had multiple different experiences with every practitioner under the sun, from faith healers to physiotherapists to surgeons to everyone. And that's how we've brought it all to the current point of our online program, the IX Experience. And it's very much about, the fountain of youth. And considering I'm almost 60 and still vibrant, and people said, could you tell us how you do what you do? And I said, sure. And that's how we came to it.
Perfect. Wow, that's an impressive opening. I'm so happy that we're all here together. And I must admit, of all of the kind of jump off points into wherever this leads, I think the one that I've literally just decided that I would like to go on is that after I was on your show, and I was episode 11, I think, on your show, and
Yes.
then episode 12 is called How We Personally Face Adversity and Keep Showing Up for Our Health and Well-Being. And that floored me, that episode, because I wasn't expecting the level of vulnerability. And for those who haven't arrived at the IX Experience podcast on all podcast channels, do that now immediately in the links below. But I mean, you had right at the beginning, I think the first one, you kind of spoke about yourselves a bit and, you know, why you wanted to do this. And that was lovely. It was like a nice kind of gentle intro. But then this one was a very extremely personal and candid, stark, challenging, introspective about what's made you and certain events of your life. I have to ask, what was the decision-making process that led you to think we're going to bear all and just show people what could arguably called our past traumas and how we've handled them? What was the decision-making criteria? How did it go? How did that flow?
Well, for me, it was everything that I share and that I've helped clients with has come from my personal challenges, the physical traumas, the emotional traumas, the violence, the disappointments, all the stuff that, like, what similar to what you went through. And instead of playing the victim, do you say, no, what can I learn out of this? I'm going to use this to grow. And so it wasn't, let's show you all of us just to be vulnerable. It's to say, this is what we went through and it was horrendous, but we've come through it. And even though, hey, yeah, we don't want to go back to that. I don't want to re-experience it, but it's made me a better person because I stepped up.
Yeah.
And
yeah, Summer, what was your take?
Yeah. For me personally, it was an experience of expressing the new version of myself. This year, I've always found it very difficult to be vulnerable because I grew up very hard. And in some reasonably, I didn't talk about this so much, but some extreme experiences. And that toughened me up. And I was also a police officer and, you know, I had some very masculine careers in my life. And this year was really about getting in touch with the more feminine, more vulnerable side of myself, because vulnerability is a strength and it helps build connection. And I'm at that point in my life where connection is now supreme. You know, it is the one thing that holds us together and it makes this world a better place. So in order to do that, I had to bring forward that vulnerability myself and figure out how to be that person comfortably. And I can't say it's comfortable with hand on heart. It's uncomfortable, but the edges are smoother than they used to be. They're not so rigid, and I don't have a vulnerability hangover after I have a share anymore. So my inspiration was genuinely, I really want to inspire people to take action. And a lot of feedback we get is, oh, it's okay for you, it must be your genetics. It's not our genetics. We have chosen to think and feel in ways that allow us the opportunity to create choices or make choices for ourselves that continue to keep us on path and lead us into the direction that we genuinely value and align to. And I always, you know, filter things with the question of, is this leading me closer to or further away from my desire? And if it's ever the latter, then I need to find another choice. So it was a real shedding of skin for me to be able to share that and put it out into the world.
Good. Oh, I mean, it was brilliant to listen to. And I think it's interesting. I remember, and I think I may have mentioned this on the one that I was on with you guys, that when I wrote Powered by Change, I submitted the manuscript to the publisher and they kind of red penned it and sent it back and said, actually, the biggest problem with this manuscript is that you're missing your personal story. And I was like, what do you mean? You know, this is my 5th book. I don't, everyone knows about my career and stuff like that. And they said, no, you need to talk about your actual personal story, like the real one. And so I had to begrudgingly write the first chapters, which were chilling, like bone shakingly worrying to write. And it was the worst. The second worst thing was writing it all down, because I'd spent so many years in therapy going through it, and I'd actually I put it in a really well packaged box that has got a hinge on it, but it also got a lock on it. But everything inside the box is well and truly processed, but nonetheless it's in a box, right? And so then I had to open it. So I sat with my therapist, and we kind of worked out how to phrase it, how much I could phrase it so it couldn't be. I had to not have any drama inside it, because I didn't want to dramatize it, but equally I didn't want to make it bland. So, and then that was the second worst part of the most challenging part. But the most challenging part was recording the audiobook. And it so happened that I was recording the audiobook the day after I split up from a 2.5-year relationship. So the audiobook recording was already in the calendar. And I didn't know that the person I was with was actually off with someone else. And anyway, so we split up at about 11 o'clock at night. And then I was in the studio at 7 o'clock in the morning after 2.5 years. And then I had to read out the beginning of Powered by Change. It's like, and anyone who's listened to Powered by Change audio can hear that. I can't listen to it anymore. I have no idea how I made it through recording it. Is there? I've noticed in your show that we're not just going to talk about the podcast. I want to go into other areas, but I've noticed that there's quite a few times where you've both been audibly moved by something that's being discussed, either by yourself or by guests or whatever. And I think it's admirable that you allow yourself to show this. Is there any have you had or felt any resistance from anyone around you who may say, are you being a bit too open about these things? Are you being a bit, are you showing a bit too much of yourself? Has anyone accused you of being too out there? Or because I think humans tend to kind of like keeping themselves to themselves, and then when people like us, I think they call it the tall poppy syndrome. Has anyone given you that?
I actually had an experience at a recent event. It was probably about maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago. And so this wasn't from the podcast, but I am a very happy person, and I get really excited when I see people I haven't seen for a while. And I was like, hey, where have you been? And I'm really excited to see them. And there was I saw a friend for the first time in weeks. We've been trying to catch up. It didn't align. And he had brought another friend with him who I had not met. And he sort of took a step back and he said, whoa, you're a lot. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, actually I am. Do you need me to tone it down for you?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, actually, no, I really like it. It's different. He just wasn't used to people being so expressive or excited or showing emotion. And that actually stimulated a lot of thought for me about, I made an agreement with myself to never dim my light for someone else's benefit, to make someone else feel better.
Yeah.
That was an agreement I made within the last few years. And that was a perfect test for me. And when I stepped back and proposed a question to him, I actually found out that he was just shocked, because people don't do that. And he actually really enjoyed it. And then we ended up having a beautiful conversation and created a really lovely bond. So had I allowed that to dim my light, I would have had a really crappy night.
Yeah.
And he would have got what he expected from humans.
Yeah.
So
is that something that in life because I believe we see reality as we are, as opposed to it is, or we see the world as we are as opposed to it is. And I'm wondering, neither of you come across as people who compromise. And Isaac, one for you is that, in the gym, your method of personal training is completely different from all other personal trainers that I've ever seen, right? And do you don't give you look as if you really just couldn't give less of a shit that's the point. Like, you're doing your thing, you're in your lane, this is what you do. And even your videos that you do, your videos that you're currently doing quite on a regular basis, which are brilliant. You don't seem to have any filter applied that is at any stage thinking, oh, is this going to be what people want to see? You seem to be a channel that is going to reach the people that are meant to be reached by it. Is that a conscious allowance, or is it something that you had to work on to get to?
Well, in the gym, it's always been put the client first.
Yeah.
And so I've gained an immense amount of knowledge from busting up my body and all of the challenges I've been through. And often I actually have to tone it down a bit. But what I find people, when I've heard this so many times, people say, when I actually got to meet you, I thought, wow, you're like really funny and relaxed, but you were so intense, because I just go into a zone, and I don't do it on purpose. It just create a bubble, and it's like I want to be 100% there with the person, because every little nuance means something. And so if a person's holding their breath, or they've got one shoulder up, or they're not aligned, then I want to gently correct them. But it's got to be, I want to create not just like, all right, 10 of those, come on, buddy, a Barry boot camp or a rep counter. It's an experience. Part of it is because I would be terribly bored if you're just counting reps.
Yeah.
Like, do that, measurements today. Like, I don't do measurements and before and after photos, because I'm saying, if we get to the essence of who you are and your challenges, then by following what I show you and us working together and you giving me the necessary feedback, then you're going to get to the right place.
Yeah.
If we need to address, you want a certain look, we can look at that, but that's always going to be secondary.
That's right.
So, it's and with the videos, I can really think, because even though I've always been very out there, I didn't even know it when I remember, it would have been 30 years ago when I was doing personal training in this new gym. And one of my clients said, do you realize that that's 4 accents in the last half hour? And I said, no, I didn't even know that I would drop into different characters just unconsciously. And it was a part of how I would deliver, soften something. Like if a person was really getting something wrong over and over again, I'd be like, come on, pal, you can do that, right? Let's do it together. Come on, and just play with them.
Yeah.
And just, it just happened organically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right.
And
that's,
with the videos,
it's great. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, with the videos, it's to say, I really want this to be educational. So, but I want it where people are engaged and it's entertaining as well. So, and I haven't started on the characters yet. You've only seen one, Sebastian. He's made it. Have you seen him?
I haven't seen it. I've heard on the podcast. I don't think I've heard Sebastian. I did hear the Scott. I'm sure I heard. No, I did hear. There is one that Sebastian speak. I've heard a few on the. I mean, I've listened to all of them. So I think you've dropped in and out of most in there.
Yeah.
Tink, I have a question for you, Tink. Sorry, I just have a question for you, Tink. You've triggered something in my head around about not letting anyone else dim your light. Do you feel that, it's a bit of a tangential question here, but do you feel that everyone has a control of a light switch, that even if they feel as if there isn't a control, there actually is one, they just don't necessarily see it? Away from a kind of a language perspective in terms of how we could announce that to people or help them see it, do you feel that we are conditioned to have a dimmer applied? Do you feel that that's something that we tend to kind of dim ourselves? Or what's the balance of the dimming?
I genuinely do believe we have a dimmer, and I actually see it as a dial. And that's when I first discovered that I had a dimmer. It was a course that I was doing. I can't remember what it was, but they said, imagine a dial in front of you, and it was all the different categories of life, like career, money, vibrance, vitality, all of those things, and turn them up. And that really spoke volumes to me. I'm a highly visual person, and I felt the physiological changes as I was turning up this dial. I could feel the energy expanding. I could really tune in to what that dial was doing. And that was a tremendous neurological link for me to say, I have full control of this.
Yeah.
And it was really most prevalent when I was in the police force. And I would have to be very specific and particular about what I did with my light, because it could be dangerous to be too turned up, and could be life-threatening. So when you start to navigate those types of experiences, and you're stuck in an ambulance with a guy who's in a psychosis who wants to kill you just because you're a police officer, you don't want to turn that dial up.
Yeah.
You want to be able to grab that dial, turn it right down, and turn up your audio dial and listen to what this person wants.
Yeah.
So it depends what the circumstance is for me personally. But it's also sometimes just turning it down, not removing it, but turning it down so someone else's can shine as well, getting your ego out of the way so that they can have a moment. And I truly believe Isaac and I have a really nice balance of that. We don't have any competition between us. We genuinely want to pump each other's tires and say, look at Isaac, and he's always fluffing my feathers. So
I love that. It's so important in a partnership of any kind, whether it's romantic, personal, professional, friends. It's so important for you to be each other's fan club and be part of each other's fan club. I see that at work is the least volume of that I notice. So I noticed that companies full of people, the amount of infighting and the venom that seems to infiltrate, unbeknownst to them, that of course that is the infectious disease that actually breaks down an organization. It's much less to do with cash flow than it is to do with people. But it's weird. I wrote a book called Business Poison many years ago, which was about all the various different ways that businesses can poison themselves. And it's a 28 chapter or 30 chapter book on on all of the various different ways that you can sabotage a brilliant vehicle by poisoning itself, largely by this. And one of the things you mentioned about listening, it's so fascinating to me that people feel that listening is passive, where in fact it's possibly one of the most active skills you can have. And there's a brilliant book called that everyone I think would benefit from, called Never Split the Difference, by a guy called Chris Voss. And Never Split the Difference, he's a hostage negotiator and terrorist negotiator from the FBI of 20, 30 years. And this is the biggest advertising campaign ever for active listening that you've ever. He calls it strategic empathy, and it's like the methods of listening are just unending. It's like complete frameworks of how to listen differently. Mind blowing. And I think you have to read it. It actually, when you read that book, at the end of that book, you have this entire new toolkit, what you're walking around with. And I wish I'd read it. Well, I don't actually live with regret. I found it when I was meant to find it. But Lord, if I had found that 30 years earlier. Anyway, what would you say now, Sommer? I kind of know the answer to this from Sommer's perspective. So I'm going to start with Isaac and then hand over to Sommer, because I don't know the answer from Isaac's perspective. Isaac, what would you say is, and it doesn't need to be in order, but a couple of your best volumes of books that you've read or listened to, or resources that have had an absolute real life impact on you?
Cool. I've got a complete blank.
Well, that's okay, because I'm going to hand over to Sommer, because Sommer always shares that. I would say half of the podcast you've done at some stage. It'll come to me in a minute. It will, I'm sure. Sommer, you've mentioned, there's quite a number of times you've mentioned the books that have been meaningful to you, and 100% of them have also been in my list, which is weird. It's very strange. Every time you mention one of these books on one of your podcasts, I'm like, yeah, that's a killer, that one. So unlike me, the people who are watching this or listening to this may not have heard your most powerful book choices. So give us a few.
The first one absolutely is The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton. I have highlights and underlines. I wrote notes on this book. I studied it like it was a PhD. It changed my world.
Yep.
What the Bleep Do We Know was a DVD series. I bought the extended version. So that's not a book, but you can buy it in book form. But Molecules of Emotion by Dr. Candace Persh. Oh, literally I'm such a nerd, could not get my head out of that book.
Yeah.
And also there's some lesser known books. One's not so lesser known, but the very first book that David R. Hamilton wrote, and I actually manifested an opportunity to meet him because I love scientists and I love authors. And he flew out to Australia from Scotland, and I don't girl fan, but I girl fanned him, or a boy fanned him. And got him to sign my book and all of that, the nerdy thing. But it's one of them is The Power of Your Thoughts, or something similar to that. That one wasn't published by Hay House, but his next one, How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body, that was published by Hay House. So any of those, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Placebo, those types of ones. I also have a whole range of business books, but the ones that interest me the most are usually about quantum physics or mind-body connection.
Cool. And by the way, Hamilton's books are, I actually kind of riffed off that in our podcast, because you may have noticed when I was talking about the gratitude that you can express when you're walking down the street to someone, and that's a lift out of the 5 Side Effects of Kindness by David Hamilton. So it's I mean, there's absolutely mind-blowingly good volumes of stuff. Even Why Woo Woo Works is brilliant as one of them.
Oh yes, I've got that one too.
So right, Isaac, I've now filled. I gave you 3 minutes of filler there.
Yeah, thank you. So I probably listen to a book every 2 weeks. And the two that come to mind are these books I haven't listened to, but there was a book written by Esther Gokhale called The 8 Steps to a Pain-Free Back. Really bland title for an amazing book. And it's all about, kind of very long story short, how she had a couple of children, serious back injury, surgery, still didn't work, and she thought something's not quite right. So she traveled the world looking at Indigenous populations, plus also this very special institute, posture and movement in France. And she learned the whole principle of kinesthetic tradition. And it was absolutely mind-blowing, because everything in the book was all about the right mechanics, but also it had the essence of the way these Indigenous people live in the extended families, and how the grandparents as well as the parents teach the grandkids. And it's all about posture, breathing, but it's more than, as I say a lot, posture is not about standing up straight, it's an attitude to life. And that's what I got from that book. It's anyone that wants to get all of the basics on how to move and how to sit, stand, all of that, she explains it really, really well and gives you wonderful examples. And I see it all the time now. I see Brazilians, and I say, yes, you can see it's embedded in their culture. The Somalians, and they just glide, it's beautiful.
That's great. That's a good recommendation.
And there's an author I love called Neil Douglas Klotz. He's a Middle Eastern scholar, and he's done a lot of interpretation of Islam, but also all of the Gospels. And he's reinterpreted the Gospels. I think I've forgotten the name of the book, Myths of the Cosmos. And he's reinterpreted all based on Aramaic, and showing how the Bible we have now, it's very black and white, but they didn't have black and white back then. So Aramaic, it wasn't good, bad, dark, light, evil, good. It was ripe, unripe, on time, out of time. So if someone steals something from you, they're unripe or they're out of time. And so it's a whole way of looking at things from a much less absolutist, harsh way. And the way the whole Sufi, because he talked about the Sufis and that whole philosophy, it's not really religion, was all about, here's, the meek shall inherit the earth, 4 different interpretations, and it was discuss. It was their opening for people to discuss things rather than, here's the dogma, live by it, or you're not going to heaven.
Yeah, quite right.
It's completely different, and it's so powerful, but just very gentle. But it's this feminine strength that's incredible.
Yeah, there's a beautiful art form in the translation of a myth from one person to another, in doing it in non-dogmatic way, non kind of you should, but more of a kind of here is a lesson structure. And Joseph Campbell, one of my favorite authors, wrote The Power of Myth, which is also the hero's journey and the pathways to bliss. But The Power of Myth is such an important book around, because it's not talking about one religion or another. It's talking about the importance of, and what myths actually do in terms of constructing a story that people can relate to and learn from if they so choose. There's also another book that I've never mentioned on any. Well, maybe I've mentioned it once or twice, and I think I don't mention it very much because as soon as I say the title, it can knee-jerk people into one way or another. But it's a book called Why Buddhism is True. And it is written by a guy called Robin Wright, and he's not Buddhist, right? So he's a scientist who's done research into Buddhism, and specifically, actually, meditation and mindfulness. And he's taken that as a structure and gone, I want to see whether or not this template, this framework, because Buddhism is a practice rather than a religion. I'm going to take this practice framework and see whether or not it's actually scientifically correct. Does meditation have these benefits? Can you see the world more clearly through mindfulness? And I give Why Buddhism is True to anyone who claims that being mindful and meditative is bullshit. I give them the book and say, if you can get to the end of this book, and then we can have any form of argument, any form of discussion, because I don't know if I'm right and I don't know if you're right, but if we both start from the scientific point of evidence, then we can at least discuss whether or not meditation is important. I mean, spoiler alert, it's possibly the most important thing we can do ever. That's the finding of the book. He spends like 60,000 words of case study and scientific evidence as to exactly why box breathing has the impacts needed and exactly what the outcome of hyperventilating is on your body and so forth. It's the A to Z, but it's just unfortunately titled in a way that people go, it's like, would you buy a book, why Christianity is true, or why Hinduism is true? You'd be like, well, that's not what I think is true. So I think it's mistitled. It should say, why meditation can save your life. But he's chosen a more provocative side. I was thinking about the IX experience in terms of titling, because when I saw the IX experience as a podcast, I thought, well, you're Isaac Xavier, so you're the I and the X. But it's evidently a 2-person, and plus guests operation. Do you feel as if the IX experience is the end game of what you will bring to the world?
Hell no.
Okay, so tell me about that pathway as much as you're allowed.
So the IX experience actually began in 2019, where my second poetry book, I wanted to make an experience, an immersive experience, a dining based on the first 5 poems of that book. And so I had put together with a design company the whole experience, like surround sound and preparing really different food on the table and all of that whole thing. And we were scheduled to have the first event on March 18th, 2020, and then everything shut down. So it never eventuated.
Yeah.
So then we went to this, it's like, we'll evolve it. And I wrote a book, which then I've expanded doubly, and that's become the online program. Yeah. And we discussed it. I said, well, I don't want it to be, because originally Tink said, I'll just do all the marketing and all of that, and I'll put in my knowledge of the mindset and all of that, but you be the front person. I don't want to be up on stage. And I just sat there and just went, I agreed, knowing that she'll be back. Because one thing that, and when people that they see us, I've always said it'd be great if people had tails, because when we see each other, it's like wagging your tails. Hello, you know when you see dogs, they wag their tails. And so we'd have that connection. So I didn't want it to be like IX, the Isaac and Xavier experience, but that's where it's come to. But we've taken it where the IX experience is going to be part of a much bigger thing, which Genius here came up with.
Tell me about that, if you can, Sommer, because I'm aware that this is going to be broadcast on the 16th of November 2022. So you may be talking of things futurespectively, but what's going to happen?
Well, I can't give away the name just yet, but when people find out the name, there is nobody that's heard it that hasn't gone, wow, that's amazing. So we've created a container, essentially, that is going to be a movement for people over 40. And the IX experience is just one element. There's going to be an invitation to a number of different people who have their own genius that they offer the world for people over 40. And this movement is going to literally shift the way people believe aging should be. So brilliant. I very much run intuitively, and I felt like my place was somewhere else, and I know where it is now when this idea came up and how the IX experience sits in it. And I've done speaking tours, I've been on stage, I've done all that. I don't have the egoic need to be seen. I'm happy to do my thing and stick in my zone of genius and build this incredible program, and let Isaac stand out on stage, and I can be out the back doing my directory.
you know what's interesting is I used to be literally up until 2 days ago, I wanted to be the front person and stand on stage and do things. And after 30 years of doing that, I arrived at an event 2 days ago and I didn't feel what I used to feel. And it's the first time in thousands of talks, and I didn't feel it. And
what do you think shifted?
I'm at a significant crossroads in my life in terms of I think I've got about, I take every hour as if it's pretty much my last hour. So I live as near to possible in the moment, and just genuinely start each hour just going, another hour, right? But maybe
great way to live.
And so sometimes I think to myself, okay, let's park my enthusiasm every 60 minutes of kind of like, I wake up in the morning, genuinely, I wake up in the morning just going, I did it. Right, okay, let's go. But let's say I've got about 14,000 days left, which is about 40 years, let's say, for sake of argument, 14,000 days. I've become really, really laser sharp focused on what I'm going to do with those 14,000 days, with the caveat that I might have one or none more, but let's assume that there were 14,000. And I'm convinced that what I want to do in that time is to enable as much disruption, positive disruption, to the existing systems of data exploitation of humans, citizen rights, the usage of our information to create monopolies that wed us into these technological magnet echo chambers. And I want to create an operating system for freedom that allows people to be able to interact safely in spaces without comparison. And so I feel like up until 2 days ago, this has been bubbling for years and years and years, I think. But 2 days ago, I arrived on stage in Port Douglas, and I was just like, I don't need to actually be, this isn't, I need to be building shit, actually. I need to be investing into stuff, and I need to be building actual things, like things that people can touch and use and stuff. And I think I've done enough of the verbal version that can make people build like their thoughts. I feel, and I'd like to continue to, I'd love to be part of what you're doing next if I can add any value. But the keynote speaking part, I can see being detuned. I think I've done enough. And it's kind of, the books are there, keynote speaking there, but I'd love to be more involved in projects as opposed to just standing on stage, and I guess
you're officially invited into the container.
Yes.
Oh, I'm invited into the container. Yeah,
absolutely.
100%. You were on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. You were already there. You just didn't know.
See, right. The thing is, we I'll take it back. When I was 17 going into college, I knew that I wanted to create something that would reach the world. And it was very simple. It was just for people to live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives by the way that I teach them and by the way I live. And then as it evolved, it became, I thought, this could be a global movement. What I'm teaching, and often people would say, why haven't you got this to the world? And I said, I've given it a crack, clearly the wrong way or the wrong time. And so I will just keep pursuing, and when it lands, it lands. And now's the right time, because I've got the right person working with me. As I realized, trying to do it all by yourself is very hard. You have a limited skill set, and to have both, it's much better. And so to have a global movement based on where people have a different paradigm of the second part of their life, and where I see so much, because we presented at an event a few years ago, and one of the presenters, he said to me, what's the one thing that you really would like to help the world? And I said, I think it's in too much pain, unnecessarily. Pain is a great teacher. We all need to experience it. But there's so much unnecessary pain. And just in, with device addiction, and the food having less nutrients, and the breathing and the posture and the stress and all of this, there's a much easier way to live. And considering that with the fountain of youth, it's, yes, you want to live healthy with eating and water and exercise and all of that. But in all the studies I've seen, the top thing is all about personal relationships. The better your personal relationships are, provided you do the right thing generally for your health, that's what you're going to be happier, healthier, and live a longer life, because you don't want to live a longer life if you're not healthy and happy.
Yeah. So, I think we're so aligned on this, us three, and I'm sure more people. I mean, the technology side of things, I can't not address before I leave this time around the sun. I can't. It's too pressing, and I have to leave technological tools in the shed for the forthcoming philosophical revolution. I have to help people, because my purpose in life is to expand the way that people think, and I can do that through mental models, but I've increasingly realized I also need to do that through technological models too, because when we arrive at our ability to show up as our truest self, in our healthiest version to ourselves, we will be still surrounded by the giant monopoly technology firms and their infrastructure that purports consumerism and comparison and self-denial, and so I think that's kind of where I'm at now, is kind of there's this non-coin flip. And everyone who's watching this knows what I mean by that. So this is less of a coin flip and more of a calling. There's a couple of professions in life that have like really high job satisfaction, and one of them's a priest. The other is a nurse, another is a teacher. And interestingly, these callings aren't job choices per se. you don't necessarily go, oh, I've looked at all of this and I'm going to take one that pays a third of what it should do and the hours are twice as much as they should be. No, but these are callings, and that's the why people. What would you say your calling is, both of you individually or together? What is your driving North Star that means you just have to get this stuff done? Sommer.
Yeah, for me, it's about changing the way the world thinks and feels and therefore believes about health and well-being. And what that actually looks like in real terms is that they turn within for the answers to their own health. They stop looking for the quick fix, the silver bullets, the pills, the externals, and they start coming back to themselves and listening to the language of the body and the communication that it's trying to have with your monkey mind.
Yeah.
So it's really my driver. I just want to make the world well.
Brilliant. Good. And Isaac, is I mean, it's the same, right? I mean, this is where your alignment is.
It is, and where even you take just the microcosm of a gym, and I see people in there harming themselves every day, and where it just want to just grab them and go, there's a much easier way where you'll get better results, your stress levels will go down, you'll actually, all of what you will develop, the neuroplasticity and the calmness and the composure, you'll take out into your life, and then it'll be this ripple effect. And I've had people I've started training with them, and then and it's really confronting when they've gone, go hard or go home. And then it's like, no, we're going to drop the weights down. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to have a calm Zen face and just very gentle breathing, really slow weights. And it's so confronting emotionally. Then they have to override that fear and all these emotions by using that more executive function, their frontal lobe, to just calm it all down. And then they report back to me. It's like, I used to yell at my kids or be really impatient with my staff, and now I'm just relaxed. People say, are you taking something? It's like, no, I'm just doing this neurophysics type, really slow, calm training. And I'm actually stronger. Like eventually people get much stronger, because instead of using this yang force, they harness this incredible superpower we all have that we just tighten over the top of.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. And the one thing, and I find it one of my great frustrations, I really, I feel people's pain. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm an empath and, not like that. It's just really, I really feel it. And I see some people, and this is where I have to turn, when you talk about turn down the dimmer. There's some people that just want to walk up to and go, come here, and just hug them. Just say, hey, I don't want anything. And that's been one of the hardest things coming up to the Gold Coast, where I'm not known, and where I'll go up to a person in the gym. It's like, no, I'm not hunting for clients. You're doing something that is eventually will be very harmful to you. I'd like to show you a better way where you get better results from what you're doing. And they're like, what do you want? Yeah. And it's like, no, this is unconditional. And that's one of the great challenges where I will give something, because I can, and it takes a moment, but people say, but what do you want? And for people not to have that fear that if someone's giving to you, they must want something in return.
I've only experienced that once in my life in a purity of that being a construct that really genuinely didn't have and what's in it for me, or what's going to be in it for you. And that was at Burning Man. And the gift economy there is just, it's so amazing. But you bring everything into the desert and you take everything away, including all your trash. Nothing's left behind, but there's no currency other than giving. And people would go and just give you a hug, or they'll give you some ice cubes. Or I bought a load of seeds, plant seeds, tens of thousands of plant seeds. And on each packet, I'd written a personal note. It took me absolutely ages to do it. Anyway, so I gave out plant seeds. And the reason why I gave out plant seeds was I wanted the gift that I gave to be something that was alive, but I couldn't give little animals, so I gave a plant. And so I would, you know, go to one of the meditation tents, and someone's gift would be to give a guided meditation, and in return, there's no such thing as giving and taking in that kind of transaction. There was just, you know, you could just take the meditation, and that's what you've given is your time. That's great. Equally, you give nothing, but I tended to give seeds to people who I felt needed something that was alive and had some chance of growth, you know. And the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages I got in the months and months and actually years afterwards is all about the seeds. So people have sent me, I've got photos of people's like New York apartment of like these sunflowers, because it was all sunflowers. There's sunflowers all across them. People have like become sunflower farmers and florists, and like there's businesses. There's like dozens of businesses opened across.
That would make a great book. That would make a sensational book, don't you think? A coffee table book. All the people. What a great story, though.
I love that.
Oh, it's so cool.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
I've never said that story out loud. But anyone who was at Burning Man with me, and there's some people who'll be watching they know, because I had this giant bag of seeds. But I've never spoken about that. It didn't occur to me until you said, Isaac, that you would just want to go up to someone and just give them something there's no expectation in return.
In alignment with talking about just doing things for people unconditionally. There's no attachment. I was living in Hong Kong in 1990 for 7 months, and I was at the ATM just getting some cash out, and this guy came up to me and he said, "Can I have some money?" And I thought, I don't know whether he's going to spend on drugs or whatever. And I said, "I'm going to eat and have dinner. Do you want to join me?" And he was shocked because he was Cantonese and I'm clearly not. And then I went, there was my favorite little cafe that I would go to. And the guy that ran the cafe was an older Cantonese man. And he would always look at me really sternly and be very gruff. And I got it, because the expats at times would treat the local Cantonese just terribly, very abusive, very racist, very rude. So I got it. And so I walked in with this Chinese lad and sat down, and he went to sit somewhere else. I said, no, we'll share a meal together. He's like, "Whoa, this just doesn't happen." And he just said, "Do you mind if I said anything you want?" Like, it wasn't expensive. We're talking, $4 for a main back then, and it was very cheap. And so we had dinner and we chatted, and I found out about his family, and he's needed money for his kids and stuff like that. So we ate and everything, and he went on his way. And then the older guy came up to me and just gave me all these bags of buns and sweets and everything. And after that, he became my best friend. Every time I'd walk in, he'd welcome me. And it just broke that mold of all whiteys are bad.
Yeah.
And it was just such a cool experience.
And I love the fact that you went into that experience not wanting to get anything out of it. It's completely selfless. And interestingly, I think there's a difference between selfish and self-full. And so I think if it's like, it's not even selfless, I think it's self-full. I think, well, that is a self-full thing. To give without expectation of receiving is self-full. That's when you really know that you're kind of in a flow with things.
There is a selfish pleasure in one way, because I love the feeling I get when someone responds.
Yes, but the thing is, I don't call that selfish, because I think that selfish is when someone else loses when you gain. I think I think self-full.
What would you call that? Whereas, because it's like, I know sometimes it can fall flat, but when you do give unconditionally and someone just says, "Oh, thank you."
Yeah. Well, I think unconditional giving is a self-full. It's self-full. It's not selfish, because no one loses. It's self-full, and it's self-fulfilling, and that's the beauty of gratitude in general, is the self-fulfilling part of it, the thanking, the respecting of that. And I love that. We can also feel good about giving, and there's no issue doing things that make us feel good. In fact, surely that's what life should be. I think that the line is, when we do things that make us feel good, that make other people feel bad, that's not good. But if we can do things that make us feel good, that make other people happy, then that's win-win. It's the same as having a job that you love. You'll never work a day in your life. And that's like us three, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And just that when people say, you actually thought of me, like, doesn't matter what you gave them. It's like, you actually thought of me. That's
you know
so
what,
nice.
Isaac, this is just there's a 10-second, quick 20-second story I've got to tag onto that. There was a guy in London, homeless guy in London, that I walked past, and I walked up because I tend to give clothes to homeless people or drinks. I don't give money, I give drinks or drinks, food, or clothes. And so, and I always have done, and I'll never stop. And so I walked past this guy, and I'm a sucker for it to such an extent I've given away most of half of my wardrobe. I can't stop it. I cannot stop. And because I just can't stand the concept of someone not having a home and being warm enough at nighttime, right? Because I've been homeless and it sucks. Anyway, so so I walked up to this guy on Waterloo Bridge in London, and I said, "Hey mate, how you doing?" And he wells up in tears. It's 7 o'clock at night. And he says, "I've sat here for 12 hours and no one has noticed me." And I was like, well, that sucks. That's just it. You know what? I said, I did. And now I'm here with you. Are you thirsty? Are you hungry? Are you cold? He said, all three. So I gave him my jacket, got him a coffee, got him a croissant. And it's I'm a sucker for it, because I remember being cold and hungry behind a pub in a car that I eventually had to give back to the car dealership, and after losing everything in business, and from that day forward, I was just like, anyone who's cold and hungry, I'm here for you. This, if we can just give it away. And obviously I'm not going to get anything in return, and I don't even really talk about it. I've certainly never mentioned it on any podcasts, but yeah, it makes me feel good that somewhere energetically I'm trying to put back, I'm trying to give back. I probably wouldn't be so driven if I didn't have two kids either. So I'm trying to make the world slightly better for those two specifically. It's like, I can't leave this place in as much crap as it's in if I can help it. That's pretty much one of my motivations, So.
Well, Tink, she hasn't spoken about it, but this big, beautiful house she has shared and given a home to, one person who was dying, and like there was, I reckon, for what, 2 years almost, there was always one person who was really down on their luck, having a bad time, whatever, and they were living in this beautiful place that she didn't have to.
Well, you actually, in your podcast, you said it in your podcast, you spoke about this story.
Yeah, I save humans, not animals.
And it was such a wonderful, it's such a wonderful part of your story in episode 12, I think, wasn't it? So that story of you selflessly looking after people in your place, unpaid, unjustified in any other reason than the fact that we can actually do so much to help other people. Everyone who's watching has to listen to all episodes of your podcast, but then you've got the Matt Legg version, you've got the gut focus one. There's, I can't believe you've just gone 13. You've done 13 at the time of recording this. There's 13 done. This is gonna, who knows where this is gonna go. But you spin forward in a year's time, I can imagine this is a kind of a Dalai Lama as a guest, maybe a previous prime minister, or kind of, I can see where this is going.
Actually, just if anyone is wondering what they can do, a small thing they can do to make someone's day, there is a little private thing that I do. One of my favorite shows that was ever created was Secret Millionaire. I always dreamed of being the secret millionaire. I would cry my eyes out every episode, and I don't cry. I just want to be able to go and secretly give money and nobody knows it was me. So I decided to create my own version, and I would just go to local cafes and say, can I pay for 2 coffees, please? But I only want one. And the other one I want to give to someone who you think needs it today. And they would be just completely gobsmacked. They would be like, what do you mean? And then their eyes would light up. The joy I got from even just the barista and their reaction. And then I would toddle off and I would just type my way around all the different cafes and go to different ones every time, just so I didn't get the same person twice. And I would just wanted to surprise and delight them. And they then got the opportunity to feel amazing when they gave someone a free coffee.
Oh,
so it was like a pay it forward thing.
I'm doing it from today. Literally, I'm going to do it now. This is brilliant. And it's for the price of a cup of coffee, the amount of joy that multiple people will have.
Yeah.
And your coffee tastes so much better. I mean, coffee's great and it tastes so much better when you've just done that and you're feeling like you're doing good in the world.
Oh, okay. I'm going to add one more thing to that. If there's she's brilliant. If there's any, here's one that everyone can also do, along with the coffee one that I'm going to definitely do. If there's someone in your life that you haven't spoken to for a while and you think would value you just checking in, send them a little message just going, hey, thought about you, how you doing? That's it. Free of charge. It's completely free of charge. It takes 5 seconds and it can have an absolutely monumentally positive impact on people. Just to know that they've been thought of, and sometimes that there's a shoulder that they can lean on or whatever it is. Sometimes if they go, yeah, all good, thanks, hope you're okay, fine. But you know what, weirdly, and I don't have any particular religious belief to tag this to, but weirdly, the majority of the time that I've done that, the person goes, oh, thank fuck, someone's actually reached out. I'm going through a really hard time with X. And it's like, wow, that's strange. Why would it be that most of the time that I've reached out to someone, it turns out that they really needed someone to reach out to them? What kind of cosmic weirdness is that? So there you go. If anyone wants to do that as from today, then please do.
Yes. See, we're changing the world one person at a time.
Okay, guys, I'm going to stop the recording. Oh, sorry. What's that, Isaac?
Oh, no, if you want to take a risk, there's on the iPhone where you can do your own little emoji, talking emoji. I send that to the Scottish rainbow unicorn, happy birthday to you, sweetie pie, and people come back and they said, oh my God, the best birthday message ever. Now and again, no one will, it'd be 1 in 50 that won't reply, but they're just like, that was the best. And I played it to my friends and, just that simple 30 seconds.
It's so simple. All the things we've done have cost less than $10 and taken less than 60 seconds. Wow. That's the learning.
And we're all full of oxytocin.
Perfect. It's people like you doing the things that you do that give me such a affirmation that people are generally good. I think people mostly want things to be as better as they can be, as good as they can be. And I think people also do have the native ability to help themselves more. And I just think it's really hard to find that pathway. And so what you're doing is admirable. You should be the front page of every newsstand. You should be on TV. People, you should be globally recognized for doing this, because it's people that you do what you do who make life better for hundreds and thousands and millions of people. So well done. Keep doing it, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to, just before we finish, I have to drop another book in there, because you definitely aligned to what I learned from this book, and it's called The Celestine Prophecy, a very famous 70s book.
Indeed.
You have it on your bookshelf, don't you? I'm sure of it.
I do.
And I loved a number of the different insights in there. There's 9 insights, I think it is. And it is a tale, a fable, but there is amazing wisdom in it. And one of the ones that I took away was that there is a purpose for every conversation, whether it's a little run into someone in the street you don't even know and have a conversation, through to the podcast we did with you. And so ever since reading that book years ago, I look for the meaning behind every conversation that I have.
Yeah.
And I always go in with the intention of making that person's day better through that conversation. And your conversation was absolutely game-changing for me. I walked away a different person from the moment before you walked in. I was not the same when you left.
So
Thank
you know, I'm leaning into doing my first ever boxing match in the ring as a result, and I'm fully engaging in the whole experience, and it's terrifying, and that's all as a result of our conversation.
Wow.
So thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I'm over the moon that helped, and I can't wait for our next conversation. And for anyone watching this, I'll put all of the links to how to get to these guys and girls. And yeah, I thank you for your time and wisdom and energy. And you guys are literally the favorite people I've met in my travels in the last few years. Have just been like, running into you has been epic, and it's just like, yes, I get to live in a world with these two people. Excellent.
Well, we've been brought together because it's going to be this amazing symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Of we have the same values that we want. It's not like I want to change the world. It's like, no, the world, I have knowledge. You've suffered immensely. Tink has, I have. We've come out the other side better people, and so we're living examples of. And that's why I think it's so important to tell your personal story.
Yeah.
So people say, oh, you did it. Wow, I can do it too.
That's right.
So it's that trust and connection to say, well, you're not a theorist. You've lived this.
Yeah. And as I said to Tink on our, when we actually had already stopped recording on our podcast, or your podcast that I was on, I said that ultimately when you change someone else's life, then you have actually changed the world. Because from their perspective, you have changed the world. So the only way of changing the world is to actually help individuals change their world. That is what changing the world looks like. So, and that's what we're all doing, right? So, okay. Yeah. Thank you both. You're brilliant.
Jonathan.
Oh, feeling it's very mutual.